Okay, yeah, working as a group, different SECs, that's the same as last week. This is our future, completely zen. Everything's going to work out great. And okay, so this evening, the idea is we go over the questions from last week, see if people had questions, and then we get to the nuts and bolts of writing a quote, which is the next step. The first step is to understand yourself or to be comfortable with what you think you want. Because it's always better when you're going to an installer, it's always better to go and say, I know what I want. Give me a price, give me details, give me brands, give me warranties, etc. But what I'm asking you for, rather than saying, you tell me what you want to sell me. So that's the goal is that we're in that position of a bit of power, okay? And then writing the quote, just a couple of things, who I think you can send the quote to, and also the kind of things that are important to get in there, because the best thing about writing a quote, or the most important thing is to give as much information as possible, so to have the best chance of basically make it easy for the installer to give you a quote, because they are busy. And if someone sends an email saying, oh, will you give me a quote for a solar system? There you go. That email has gone to the back of the queue, and that will be seen, some other day. Whereas if we'll talk about the kind of things you can give them in terms of information, where they'll be able to say, okay, I can give a price on this. This is clear, okay? So the homework. Space on roof. How do people do? The first thing was to go and look at your roof and see, given system size, and I was talking about a 5 kilowatt system, which is a very common one in terms of it matches up pretty well with the electricity usage in a house. Like a south-facing 5 kilowatt system will produce about 4,500 units a year. Okay, but we'll need 25 square meters. So did people have a chance to go and look at their roofs, or to go and measure slates and tiles, or look at their garage, or look at their ground? Does anybody want to come in there and ask a question on that?
I didn't go up a ladder.
Oh no, we don't want anybody going up ladders or hanging off chimneys or anything like that now.
Yeah, I did look at it from the ground. Now I have 2 solar panels up there already that do the water.
Right.
They're big enough, all panels now. I mean, to be honest, like a meter, I don't know. I'd need to actually see it. 1.8 meters. You're saying that's basically the height of a man.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, we'll say, what's that? 5 feet, just over 5 feet by 3.5 feet. 5.5. Yeah, 5'8", something like that. Okay. 5'9". So it's a decent size. It's almost like a door. It's almost that kind of size.
Okay.
So what I was saying last week, installers will work with spaces. They will move. They don't need a single big clean rectangle. They can put a few panels there. They can turn panels on their side. They can be flexible, and they can put them on multiple roofs. You don't need to have them all on one roof. You can have some. If you have a west-facing roof, an east-facing roof, that's not a problem. It will be, depending on the orientation of your roof, your production may may drop or increase. For example, south-facing is the highest production, and then anything off south will drop slightly. I'll show you a tool later on, which will show you where you can calculate that with a fair degree of precision.
Like the house itself that we're in here is south-facing, but the garage then at the side of the house would be west-facing.
Right.
There's nothing at all on the garage roof. I would have the whole of the garage roof. Right. But the panels that are doing the water, would they have to be replaced?
No. I would say, if people have solar thermal panels, if they're working, leave them in place. There's no point taking stuff down that's working. I say,
Oh my God, they are working. I've loads of hot water now.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. In that case, I have them in my own house. I put them up 12, 14 years ago. They're working grand. I wouldn't. There's no point. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Now, so the question in your case then would be, okay, if you were to put all the panels on the western facing, you can just think in terms of the orientation, because that means in the morning you're getting no electricity.
Yeah.
Because the sun is rising on the east, and when it swings around to the afternoon, that's where you're getting your big production, and you'd be producing later on into the evening, which in a way is not too bad, because as I mentioned last week, typically in a home, we use most of our electricity in the afternoon. The cooking in the evening, the washing, the whatever's going on, most of that happens in the afternoon, the evening. So like if I was to choose to say only either an east facing or a west facing, I'd go for a west facing because it does match up better with your usage. And that has an impact in terms of the trying to decrease the amount that you're going to send out to the grid, sell back to the grid, and increase the amount you get to use yourself in the house. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, I reckon I could 4 or 5 of them maybe on the roof of the house.
Okay.
I think I could get maybe 4 or 5. Four might be the most. There's definitely room for 3 anyway.
do you have dormer windows and that kind of stuff on the?
I do.
Yeah, because I
Not
think to take it.
No,
I think
it's a 1.5 story house, so it's not a dormer.
Okay,
you know
yeah,
what I mean?
they're not big dormers. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because that one rule there is you've got to be 500 mil away from the bottom, from the outside of the gutter, 500 mil away from the sides, the 2 sides, and anything else on the roof, be it the ridge of a dormer or a velux or a chimney, everything else you have to be 200 mil away from that. So it does, when you've got other things, if you have a busy roof with other panels, bit of a dormer, bit of a chimney, that can kind of eat up the space a little bit, like.
Okay.
But of course, you work with what you work with. That's it. Like now, I did talk last week about the option. There are ground mount is an option. If the roof doesn't work.
Sorry, say that again. Ground
mounted, which is where you put the panels on a frame on the ground.
Would that? I mean, look, I have space there at the back of the house. I could put a load of panels in it, but
that's the thing. If you have
would
space,
that not drive the price up with wiring, etc. If they're not on the house, because surely it had routed in.
It does drive the price up a bit. Now, typically, what a lot of installers will do is if there's a bit of concrete to be poured, they may put that on your side. But one of the most important, or one of the most expensive parts of a solar installation is the roofers who do the work. Getting roofers or whatever else. Roofers are expensive people. Whereas work that's being done on the ground can be cheaper. So a ground mount system is a little bit more expensive. You could be looking at between 500 and 1,000 euros more compared to a roof mounted. But like in your case, if the option was to go for a west facing installation only or a south facing installation with ground mount, like west facing installation due west will be losing 20% compared to a south facing.
Okay.
So if you were to, like in that case, if you were to go for a ground mount, a south facing ground mount, you're back up to that like optimum generation,
Okay.
So it's something you can put it. That's definitely the kind of thing to go into a quote. To ask the question in a quote. What the different price? If you're not sure, this is one option. This is another option. Give me a price for both.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of measuring, were people able to work it out with the slates or the typical average slate width and slate height for the exposed areas?
Yeah, I think so. Can I ask you a question, Colin?
Yeah, sure thing, Barry.
If your panels are in groups, split up, say, on your roof to allow for, let's say, a group of 6 and maybe a group of 3 or 4 and then another group, how are the cables pulled to go to the inverter? Do they go? Does each group of panels have cabling that then is joined together to go to the inverter?
Well, typically, if you're going over if we know a small system, let's say 2 kilowatts or below, once you get above that, your panels are always organized into 2 strings, into 2 groups. That's what it's called, 2 strings, and they go independently to the inverter. So, for example,
so is that the maximum then? 2 groups?
2 strings? No, because you can have the string is. That's from the inverter point of view. You have 2 groups of panels going into the inverter. But if you had one of those strings that was split up onto 2 or a bit of, let's say, either side of a velux or something like that, right, then you'd have to run the cable on the roof to join those 2 together. They would come down as a unit. Now,
so the cable is on the surface of the slate, is it?
If it's slate, there are clips they can use to hold them into the slate. So it's not, right, you obviously don't want it flapping loose.
Of course not. No, it doesn't go into the attic. So
no. To be honest, I can't give a definite answer because obviously it depends if you're running 10 meters of a run, and if it is easy to get access to the attic, they may run it inside. It does depend on the situation.
Yeah. So it can, but basically you can comfortably put your panels in a number of different sections of your roof split up.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's not a problem.
Right.
Like that cabling, the cabling that goes on the roof between the panels is not very heavy cabling. It's not that's relatively low voltage, low power. So there's nothing heavy that way.
Grand. Okay. Lovely. Thank you.
Okay. Will we move on, or any more questions on the roof side of things?
Colin Michael O'Sullivan, I wasn't here last week. Just some questions. On a ground-mounted system, is it a requirement that you have a concrete base?
No, there are a bunch of different kinds of ways you can do it. It all depends on your soil. In one way, like if you've got soil into which you can put in a screw foundation, there are like a lot of companies will do the screw found. It's a big metal screw, with like that gets augered into the ground. Some of them use tree system foundations where you drive in each metal frame, each leg of your frame will have four like big long metal bars going in at kind of at diagonal angles. So there's a bunch. You don't necessarily need to do concrete. It depends on what your ground is like. Whether if it's rocky ground, if it's easy to work with soil, it depends. But it doesn't have to be concrete.
Okay. And what about distance then from the inverter, a ground panel? There's no issue, is there? Or from the fuse board?
Yeah, it's a question of cabling. You size the cabling according to the distance. You need to get heavier cable potentially, but that's not like it's nothing strange to see systems that are 50 meters, 80 meters away from wherever the inverter is.
And one other question, on the water tank, what's the criteria around using an existing tank? Our house is 80, 90 years old, and I'm not sure that the tank would be compatible with solar heating system. I mean, what's the criteria there to evaluate?
Well, to be honest, like heating water from a solar PV system is only a question of turning on your immersion with solar electricity. So if the electric immersion is operational at the moment, then it will work with the solar PV system won't work it any harder. It won't be, all you're doing with a solar PV system, if you take that, we talked last week about an option called a hot water diverter, which is where if you have excess electricity not being used in the house, instead of sending it to the grid with a hot water diverter, you can automatically just turn on the immersion to take that little bit of excess. And all that's doing is turning on the immersion. There's nothing else, there's no modification, there's no hardware modification to the immersion tank itself. So it really is a question. It really is a question. That's more of a plumbing question as to how, if you're worried about the tank. But from a solar perspective, it doesn't make any difference to it.
So you'd have to get a plumbing assessment done likely in advance of getting the quotation done. And the plumbing will be done separately, I'm assuming.
Yeah, if it's like solar PV is an electrician's job. It's electrical and a roofer's job. If you're doing something working with your immersion tank, then that's a plumbing job. Most often they won't take care of that themselves.
And is there any regulation in relation to placement around the battery in the PV if I have it in the garage, but I also have an oil boiler there? Fire risk or anything around that?
No, the only risk, like there isn't any, like there's no spark risk. You have electricity in the garage. The only from a fire regulation side of things, it gets mounted on fireboard. The surface behind it has to be fireproof or fire retardant. So it gets, if it's going in the attic, if it's going any place it's going, it needs to be mounted on a board that is fire retardant. In terms of proximity to an oil burner, I don't know, but again, this is the piece of electrical equipment. They're not particularly, it's not considered to be hazardous equipment, in terms of regulations. So I don't know of cases where people haven't been able to install them because there was in a shed and there was also an oil burner in the shed. But again, that might be more of an installer's kind of a question to ask. Okay, Mark, I see you just joined in there. We're just going to move on from the roof side of things or the ground. Do you have any questions on that?
No. I missed obviously the beginning. I tried to go to the original meeting site and didn't have the right location. But anyway, carry on, and I will get the deck later.
Okay, fine. Okay, so next question was, where was the next question? The questioning on where the inverter and battery would go. Have a look around your house with an idea that somebody be comfortable or happy for it to go from an access point of view, from an aesthetic point of view, you know. So do people get to, you know, utility rooms, under the stairs, garages, lean-tos, outside walls, attics? Have people been or do you have questions about that? Where you think it can go? Okay, like there is that roughly the 1 meter by 1 meter. That's a little bit oversized. You know, if you have 1 meter by 1 meter, you'll be fine. They just do need a little bit of space around the inverter. There's a couple of other safety switches and stuff that go in there, and likewise for the battery. And also to think, I suppose, even if you're not getting a battery first time out, potentially if you are going to go for a battery, that needs to be relatively close to the inverter. So to think about that in the you know, your PV system can evolve. It doesn't, you know, you may go for an inverter initially, and then next year, or 2 years, 5 years time, you may go for a battery. 5 years later, a bigger battery or something, you know, something like that.
How close is relatively close?
Very typically, the batteries are within 3 or 4 meters of the inverter. It's very rare you'll see it going beyond that.
Okay.
Now, again, you're running DC cable, so it's a question. If for some reason it needs to be further away, you just need to size your cable correctly to work for that distance. But I guess I haven't seen cases where it's, you know, where you don't fit it. Usually people will find a location where the inverter and the battery can go. You know, either they will move, you know, they may have had an initial idea, I'd like to have the inverter there, but if they can't fit the inverter and battery, they'll move them both to another location rather than just having the inverter and the battery completely separate. Okay, so we're good on that, on where the battery goes, where the inverter and the battery goes. Last one then is reading your meter, reading your electricity bills, getting an understanding of how much electricity you use a year, which obviously gives you an idea of the size of system you could be looking at. And also thinking about what kind of things are more in the winter, what kind of things happen at night or are on continuously during the day, so that mightn't necessarily match up with, you know, solar does get generated during the day. If you don't have a battery, you will be targeting your daytime loads. If you do have a battery, you get that little bit of buffer. It's a bit better. So did anybody find any? Let me see. The best ones that I've seen so far are aquariums with pumps and lights that are on full time and that are sucking electricity. I found somebody whose child had a hamster with a heated mat for the hamster, which was using about 1,500 kilowatt hours a year. So I think the hamster, I don't know if the hamster survived. The other things like water, like if you have a well, for example, and a pump, these are things that are, or if, you know, if you have medical equipment, if there's certain parts that have dehumidifiers, these are the kind of things, the things that use a lot of energy are the ones that are on, even for a small amount, a small power amount, but constantly. They're the ones that eat it up. So does anybody find anything funny or anything you have questions about? Funny, peculiar?
Well, we have I'm not sure what you call it, you know, a septic system or something like that has, I think, an electrical something or other connected to it.
Okay, I think an impeller or an agitator or something like that, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to.
And were you able to get an idea of how much it's using? Did you get did anybody do the homework of looking at reading the meter at night and reading again in the morning to see what's going on?
That I didn't do, but
was everybody able to find their meter? Were there any surprises?
Can't open mine. It's on the side of the house. It needs some funny kind of key thing. I can't see through I know some people have one where you can see through it. I can't see through mine. I went out with a screwdriver and I still couldn't get into it.
Well, it's either a sledgehammer or one of those very, very thin-nosed pliers will do the job as well. You probably have a triangular kind of a
yes
key.
Yeah,
thing
I mean,
there.
if you're not too far, as I imagine you're not, I'd be happy to bring by my key to open your box.
Yeah, if you go into any hardware store, typically they'll have them. You know, if you ask it, because they're standard keys for all over the country. You know, so and typically they cost like 2 or 3 euros as well. Like, you know.
Okay.
Okay, but sure. Listen, you know where it is, anyway. Now, did you,
do.
from reading your bills? Can people give me? Can I hear? Actually, let me get a pen first of all, and then let me come back to you. Okay, hands without a pen. Okay, but tell me, so what are people seeing in terms of your usage, in terms of your annual electricity usage?
I was looking, Colin, it's Kieran here, and I was looking at my bill there, and it's roughly about, on average, maybe about 700 units per 2 months. Would that be right?
Okay,
right?
Yeah, that sounds fairly economical, like, you know, whatever, about 4,000, just over 4,000 a year.
Yeah. That
Okay.
system would still be fine, wouldn't it, for the likes of that, a 5 kilowatt system?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Would
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
cover
absolutely. And did you see, were you able to see if there was much change over the course of the year between winter and summer? Or was it kind of constant?
I kind of pulled out one there that was kind of, it was up around 700. And that was a winter one that was kind of over Christmas and that. So it would be a little bit lighter than that in other times then, you know, from going forward out into the summertime, it would be a little bit lighter. Not hugely great, but a good 600 units, 600 to 700 units, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's a good. That's would say the first thing obviously is if you to be able to reduce, or just if your starting point is relatively low, and that's a good level to be at. Like, you know, if you're coming in around 4,000 units a year, that's a good. You know, you then don't need a bigger system to be thinking about for that. So that's good.
That'd be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So what other kind of, actually, again, I'll show you the tool that'll be able to show you, depending on the orientation of your roof, depending on the size of the system, what kind of production you'll be getting. Okay, so you'll be able to match up then. Basically, if you say I want to produce 4,000 units, then you'll be able to see what size system you need for that.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, anybody else have any figures there for your annual usage?
About 6,000 for me, Colin.
Right. Okay, and were you able to get an idea of where do you use a bit of electric heating at any point, even with space, room heaters, or that kind of stuff?
A good chunk of that's going into the car.
Ah, okay.
EV car.
Yeah. An EV, just kind of if you work it out, EVs usually use around about 15, 16 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So if you work it up 10,000 kilometers a year, that's about 1,500, 1,600 units. So definitely, if you have an electric car, there's no surprises there. Okay. Anybody else? Can anybody beat 6,000 on the way up or 4,000 on the way down?
I think I'm in around 2 grand.
2,000.
Yeah. Why is that? I don't know. Is that good? Is that bad?
Well,
I don't know.
That's 2,000 units. That's very low.
No.
2,000 euros.
2,000 units. My God, I'd be living in the garage.
Okay, no, 2,000 euros now. That would seem a bit. Yeah, that would. You'd be on the higher end of things. Now, you do need. See, the thing is, when you look at your bills, you really do need to go in and see where it gives the meter reading, not the cost, because particularly in the last 12 months or the last 18 months, 24 months, prices have been going so crazy that you can't really get information from the amount of money you spend on your solar when you're trying to size the system. It really is the kilowatt hours. So which company are you with?
Energia.
Okay, I think on their bills they give, if you look at one of their bills, they compare with you know, they tell you your usage over the previous 12 months. I think I know Borgosh did that, and I thought Energia did as well. Usually you need to look on the second page of the bill, the dreaded second page of the bill with all the facts and figures.
Where it says understanding your bill. Oh no, it's down further. Sorry, I'm looking at it here. Sorry, I just opened on the phone.
Because there should be, like, in the bill, it will give you your meter reading, or it'll give you the number of units that you've used, one or the other. And the idea being that if you were to go back 12 months and look at the bill, and like you get a meter reading then, and then you come to your most recent bill and look at the meter reading now, and then you take one from the other, and that gives you your usage. You know. Now, not easy to do on a phone when you're reading your bills on the phone.
Okay, so from, I suppose, start November to the start of January, it was 858 units.
Okay, that doesn't sound too bad.
I'm deadly when the girls go to bed, and I go around here like a lunatic, switching everything off.
Right, no, that doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah.
As Kieran was saying there, the winter is always a little bit higher than the summer. So if you're doing 800 units for that 2-month period, 850 units, you're coming in around 5,000, probably a bit less than 5,000. That's good.
Okay.
€2,000, if you take it on the electric Ireland prices, is 5,500 kilowatts.
Right. Okay, which is close enough to what you're seeing there, yeah. Okay, so you're in around the 5,000. Okay. Anybody else have anything to share there, or any surprises? Okay, but anyway, the goal here was that you know how much electricity you're using, because that is what's going to decide what size system. That's one of the most important things to know when you're going to size a system. You know, because one thing, some installers and even some people on different forums and that, they kind of say, well, if you've got plenty of money, put up loads of panels, fill your roof with panels, put the maximum amount of panels up there, like, and then you can sell back to the grid, and you'll make money by selling back to the grid. Which I find a little bit risky. Well, I suppose first of all, not necessarily everybody has lashings of money to fill the roof with solar panels, and also some people who think it's a kind of a retirement plan by putting up as many panels as possible. The price we get paid for the electricity we sell back to the grid, that's not written in stone. Like, there is no guarantee that will. Well, the guarantee is it will change. There's no guarantee it will stay at the high levels that it's at the moment. And it is, you know, the prices at the moment are high because when they came in, electricity prices were very high. And I'm pretty sure the market will have to move that way. We'll see prices starting to drop. Like, for example, we saw the most recent entrant into the market, Energy. They came in at a good price, single day rate price. I think it was 29 cents initially. And their feed-in tariff was 15 cents, which is like 7-8 cents below everybody else. But that's kind of a business logic. You know, they can sell cheap and buy expensive. You know, that doesn't make sense from the supplier's point of view. So it's just something I do think people should focus more on, what do I need? What is my actual need, my usage, and then size your system on that. Okay, let's see. Next bit of homework. Was that it? Was that all we had? That's all we had. Okay, not too bad. Okay, next thing now is writing a quote. Okay, getting on to the idea. We have a rough idea about what we could fit someplace, on a roof, on a shed, on the ground. We have a rough idea of what our usage is. So now it's a question of how do we go out and get prices for systems that would be kind of would be related to that. Now, two rules here. This is, I mentioned these already. When you're writing a quote, the goal of the Meitheal, and the reason why we want people to ask questions and to be comfortable with what they're learning, is that first of all, you want to be a little bit in control. When you're going out to the installers, you need to tell them what you want. You know, it's not kind of, here, sell me some solar panels, sell me something. You know, ideally you would say, this is the amount of solar panels I want. If I want a battery, this is the size battery I want. I want them to go on this roof. I want the inverter to go in this room, and the battery or whatever in this room. And there you go. So you're telling them clearly what you want, and they'll be. For them, it's easier to give a price as well. And also rule number 2 then, in terms of information, you give them as much information as possible that is relevant to the job, because you want to make it easier for them to answer. They look at the email and they have no questions. They say, yeah, I see the roof. I see this is how much they want. I see they want a battery. They don't want a battery. And then they can give you a quicker response. Now, the reality is that most installers will give you if you get an email response. The installers are not calling out on spec anymore for domestic jobs to call out and to do a site visit, unless they happen to be driving past, or if you're very close to where they are, you may get lucky. But I would say in general, don't expect an installer to call out to the house, spend half an hour with you talking about whatever, and then to get a price from that. So you're in the game of trying to make it easier for them to write an email. Somebody sees, you will send an email in to them, and they will say, I have all the information I need to give a price quickly, and they'll bang an email back out to you. That is, make it easy for them, and then there's a better chance you get a response. Okay, so that's they're the two kind of core rules. Okay. Now, okay, in terms of telling them what you want, we start off the 3 things in terms of knowing what you want. Well, and they're fairly straightforward. We've talked about how much money do you have? Is it limitless? Did you fall into a ball of money recently? You want to spend it all on solar, or do you have a bit of money put aside and you could use that? Second one there is we talked about as well. How much electricity do you use, or do you need? Would you like in your system? So if you know that you're using 4,000 units a year, and if you know, for example, you're looking ahead into the next 5 years, and you say, I'm not going to buy an electric car. I'm not going to get a heat pump. I'm fine. My house is insulated, whatever. That's what I'll be using for the next 5 years, 4,000 units. Well, then size the system for 4,000 units. That's what, that's the base it on your need, or on the future need that you're pretty sure you're going to have. Now, again, of course, if you've loads of money, yeah, fine. If you want to put in oversize, why not? And then the next limiting one is how much space do you have? Because if you've got a small roof, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you can't fit the panels up there anyway, unless you're going for a ground mount. So it's mixing those 3 together. How much money do I have? How much electricity would I like to generate? And then how much space do I have? Can I fit, like you might say, I want a battery. But if you're living in a small house and there genuinely isn't space, and you really want to have the inverter in the utility room, then maybe you can't have a battery. So there's those 3 things are the you put those in together, and you get your kind of solution out of that. Okay, now here from a cost perspective, this is just an idea in terms of cost. Okay, and these are the kind of prices that are being seen. These are the reasonable prices that are being seen out there. You will see more expensive prices, but these, you shouldn't be too far off this. So if you were to go with, let's say you're going to go with a bare bones system, which you may or may not expand in the years to come, but a bare bones, and I'm putting this in as a 4 kilowatt system, because that is the max. Sorry, that would allow you to get the maximum grant. The maximum grant is €2,100, and that is for a 4 kilowatt system. If you go for a 3 kilowatt system, it'll be €1,800. It drops, it increases up to 4 kilowatts, but beyond 4 kilowatts, it doesn't get any bigger. Okay. So in the case of a 4 kilowatt system, if you don't have a battery, that system will produce around about 3,500 units a year. And it will cost, before the grant, it'll cost about €7,500. So after you get your grant back, €2,100, final cost out of pocket should be €5,400. There or thereabouts. Okay, just to give an idea. Now, what I mentioned in that one there, I say it's a string inverter. Okay, that's one thing we'll think about that in our quotes as well. There are 2 types of inverter. A string inverter cannot manage a battery. If you want to have a battery, you won't have a string inverter, you'll have what's called a hybrid inverter. Okay, so that's why I was saying the bare bones system, that system will never have a battery unless you change the inverter and get a different kind of inverter. But that is, then just to get your initial starting price for not far from €5,000, you can get a 4 kilowatt system producing about 3,500 units. You should be, and this is why the idea is to go to quotes to a number of people and to be able to compare and get value. So string inverter. Now the second option, then we're making it a little bit bigger. Again, I'm going for this typical 5 kilowatt system. Now, actually, just in terms of just from the stats, the figures that are provided by AirGrid, the average system size that's being installed in the country in the last year or so is about 4.5 kilowatts. That is what you're, overall, when you take all the systems, and there are now over 80,000 systems installed. But last year, typical installation size was between 4.5 and 5 kilowatts. Now, there are some people that go for 7 kilowatts, 8 kilowatts, and they're delighted. And, why not? If they have the money, if they have the roof, if they have the usage, fine. But most people are going for in that 4.5 to 5 kilowatt range. So I put in the price there for a 5 kilowatt system with a battery. Again, this is one of the rules. As your system gets a bit bigger, if you want to get value from that system, a battery will ensure that you're using more of the electricity that you're generating. Because otherwise, with a bigger system, basically, you'll be exporting more to the grid. Your percentage, if you don't have a battery, what you'll see is your percentage being exported. If you don't have a battery system, typically you'll be exporting about 60% of what you're producing, and you'll be using 40%. So the way you calculate your payback, the value you get from it changes. Okay, now there is an extra cost to it, but the battery does get it does mean that you get to use more of your own electricity. And there are a couple of other things that I mentioned last week as well. With the battery, for example, during the winter, if you're on a good night rate, you can buy cheap at night and use during the day. You fill your battery at night, even if your solar isn't producing that much. And obviously, as well, if the grid goes down, then you can have power from your battery. So you can keep your freezer going, you can keep your internet router going, or whatever. Okay, so in that case there, 5 kilowatt system, 5 kilowatt hour battery, hybrid inverter, before grant, about 11,500 euros. So with the grant taken off, then about 9,400. Now you will see those prices are sometimes you will see a little bit cheaper than that, but I don't want to sell too low. But that is a reasonable. If you're getting that kind of a price, that's a decent kind of a price. Okay. But when we go out looking for quotes, what I'll be recommending is that you send out requests for quotes to at least 5 or 6 installers, so that the goal would be that you would get at least 3 prices back, so that you're, and if you don't have enough, then I'll show you where you can get lists of more installers. So you can go, you need to get a number of quotes so that you're comfortable with the kind of prices that you're seeing. That it's not for lack of quotes that you're making a bad decision. Okay, now has anybody seen any in terms of people you may know who put systems in? Is that checking out with you, or have you seen higher prices, lower prices, or has anyone gotten to the stage of actually getting prices?
Nope.
Okay, that gives an idea anyway. Okay, now obviously I say here a 4 kilowatt system. Sorry, let me go back here. A 4 kilowatt system, you can go for a 3 kilowatt system, you can go for a 2 kilowatt system. There's no law that says you have to, like in terms of the highest grant per kilowatt, the 2 kilowatt system is the highest proportion of the grant. But because it's a smaller system, the proportion of the labor, as in a roofer going up on a roof, if he's putting up 4 panels or 6 panels, it costs pretty much the same. Or the electrical work for putting up an inverter for a 2 kilowatt system or 4 kilowatt system is pretty much the same as well. So your cost per kilowatt, I think your sweet size is around your 4 kilowatt for the best balance between maximizing your grant and not spending too much of the system.
I have a question about the planning that's involved. I know you're allowed to put up, is it something like you can use 50% of your available roof space? What's the planning around having them put on the ground?
Planning on the ground, I think if it's not above 25 square meters, there's no issue. And also, if it's above 25 square meters, then the only thing you need to think about is they talk about the front line of the house. So if it's basically between the house and the road, in front of the house, that's something that if you do need to go down the planning route, that's something. Actually, hang on a second. 25 square meters is wrong. Let me get the answer to it. There's no point in me giving speculative answers. Okay, just a second. Let me take a notepad here and this down. So I'm thinking, like, I know plenty of systems that are going in 7-8 kilowatt systems on ground mounted systems, and no one's applying for planning. But I'll just check that out. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Colin, if you assume that now I have the average profile, but the plan would be maybe to go EV, for both cars in the next 2-3 years. What do you do to future-proof the system in terms of wiring, in terms of the infrastructure going in? So, I mean, do you have to do anything specific? Do you actually overspec if you want to put in an extra battery in the future, but you're only putting in one now, for example?
Yeah, well, like the battery is very easy to expand in the future as long as you have space to put it in someplace. So that is, there's no need to worry about sizing a battery now for what you may be doing in 5 years' time. And again, typically, particularly with EVs, because I guess that is in the next 5 years or so, that's probably where we'll see the biggest change. I think there'll be more houses going for EVs than going for heat pumps, for example. And of course, then the EV is a very heavy user of electricity. You know, if it's your main driving car, if you have 2 cars in the house, then you know you could easily be. What does the average car drive? About 20,000 kilometers, 20,000 kilometers a year.
Around that,
yeah. So you're talking 20,000 kilometers. You're talking 3,000, 3,500 units of electricity extra per car. So that's a certain bunch of electricity. One thing I would say about electric cars is, purely from a cost perspective, well, actually, there's 2 perspectives. From a cost perspective, the cheapest way to charge an electric car is with a specific EV night rate charging rate. Your solar won't be cheaper than the kind of rates we're seeing at the moment. Okay, that's one thing. Like you're getting with Bord Gáis or Energia, you're getting like 8, 9, 10 cents a unit for 3-4 hours a night, specifically for like it's EV plans. The second thing is, electric cars are massive batteries on wheels, and when you charge them, they take a massive amount of electricity. Even at a home charger, like your entry-level home charger will charge at 7 kilowatts, right? Getting 7 kilowatts from a solar system, as in a solid 7 kilowatts, is a very difficult thing to do. You know, the solar system itself won't be producing at peak, even if you have a 7 kilowatts, won't produce at peak. And then also, if you have a battery, if you have a 10 kilowatt hour battery, the maximum power you can draw from the battery is usually half the capacity. So if you have a 10 kilowatt hour battery, the maximum power you can pull out is 5 kilowatts at a given time. So the reason I'm giving those figures is to say the way people charge electric cars doesn't really fit with the way electricity is generated. Like you can plug in your EV during the day and it'll be trickle charging, you know, from the sun. If the battery's full, or if you set it to, there'll be some electricity going into it. But the reality is the majority of your electricity will be coming from night rate charging. That is what I see kind of across the board. And you will get a certain proportion from your solar panels, but I wouldn't necessarily say, okay, I'm going to need 5,000 units extra in a few years' time because I'm going to have 2 EVs. So I'm going to plan to produce 5,000 units more. The only reason you would do that is if you want to do from a clean conscience point of view and say, I want to be able to say I'm producing my own clean electricity, even though you don't use it in your car. That's going onto the grid. You're getting paid for it. Somebody else is using it, and then you're buying the electricity on an EV rate. So I wouldn't necessarily size a solar system for EV usage. I would add a little bit of a margin. Like if you say you're going to be using 3,000 units a year extra, yeah, maybe go for 2 extra panels, maybe an extra kilowatt of PV. I wouldn't necessarily oversize it. And again, if you're going to be using 3 kilowatts or 3,000 units extra, that is a decent quantity. That is 8 panels, 15 square meters of roof space extra. So no, you may have a very big roof, you may have the space there for it. So that may not be an issue, but at some point it becomes tight as well.
Can I ask a question about something you may have covered already, which is it's about the energy that goes back to the grid and how that is calculated, either in Ireland generally or with the differing companies.
Okay, what happens is now at this stage, do most people have smart meters?
Yep.
Yeah.
In our case, we happen to have 3, possibly 4 meters. I think we have 4 meters Two of them are smart meters, and I think two of them are old style spinning meters that I assume eventually someone will want to change. But
yeah. Okay, well,
it's a little peculiar here.
Yeah, to explain how it works from the smart meter point of view, the smart meter can measure electricity flow in both directions. Okay, so that information goes back to ESB networks. They manage the grid, they manage the meters, and they provide on a monthly basis. They're actually not even a monthly basis because you can see it in real time, but they provide all that metering data to the whatever electricity supply company is linked to that meter. So you know they have their database saying, here's every meter in the country, here's the electricity supplier. So they just send the data to them. And then that means your electricity supply company then has typically it's on the same cycle as the billing cycle. So either monthly or bi-monthly. So they would put it in as a credit. Like I see it, for example, I get my bills every 2 months. And every 2 months I have a line saying, here's a credit for the amount of units you've generated. And this is the price we pay you per unit.
And that price that they pay per unit, is that just different based on the time of day and which energy company you are connected to, or do they tell you that information?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, like, but at the moment, the only all companies have a fixed price throughout the day. So it doesn't matter whether you're producing morning, afternoon, or evening. It's the same price. All companies set their own price. They decide what there is no regulation that says what price they have to set. When the commissioner, the regulator brought in the rules for the feed-in tariff, they said companies have to give a price, but the price can be zero. So basically, it's a market-led thing. Like what do companies think will get them customers? The balance, because again, you have to remember, as soon as you become a PV producer, you become a very bad customer for an electricity supply company. So
of course,
you know.
So could you tell me what they're giving you now, and has it changed over the course of the period?
21 cents a unit.
Oh, really? Oh, that's quite good.
It's very good. Like the pricing in Ireland is very good. And now, see, those prices came in. I haven't seen any company drop their feed-in tariffs yet, but I'm pretty sure they will because the wholesale prices have dropped. We see the consumer prices are dropping as well. Like it's relatively easy to get like 28, 29 cents a unit if you shop around through brokers at the moment. So it doesn't make any sense that they will sell to you at 28 cents. They will buy from you at 21, 22 cents. You know, and also, you're buying less because you're producing a lot more of your own electricity now. So, but that's
okay. No, I was just curious because it's a very different system than it is in the States where I'm from, and I have had solar for 15 years, and yeah,
lots of different countries, even the States, different companies have different
absolutely 100%. Yeah. Thank you.
So that's an area. Will you move on from cost, will you? If there's nothing else there, let's move on then, okay? Okay, now this is an example of a tool. This link, I'll stick it up there in the chat, and I'll go and just show you how to use it for if you want to calculate how much electricity you can produce in your own house, because the things being size of the system and the direction the house is facing. So let me go in here into this link. Actually, I have it up there someplace, I think. Is it there? There we go. Okay, so that link, I'll throw it up in the chat. You want to go in at the same time as I'm on here and put it on your own side. Okay, so what that link does on this web page is you put in your details. First of all, you say, what's the location of your house? So it converts your air code into latitude and longitude. So it'll give a calculation specific to your location. So this is my house. Now down here, you put the direction of your roof, the direction your roof is facing, roughly. Here, the increments here are rough, what is it, 20, 45, yeah, 22 degrees increment. So this is, I'm going to say, imagine it's facing due south. If your roof is facing east, you put it over here. If it's facing west, you put it over there. Okay. Now, a typical roof slope is about 35 degrees. So if you're thinking of put it on, for example, on a garage roof, on a flat roof, you'd put in 15 degrees. That's the standard. If you're going onto a flat roof, panels will be at 15 degrees. If for some reason you've got a roof that's got a higher slope, put in a higher slope. Otherwise, like the difference in the area between 25 and 40 degrees, it doesn't make a huge difference. So don't worry too much about what's going on there. Okay, let's put in 35 there. Then you put in the size in kilowatt, kWp, kilowatt peak. That's the maximum output of your system. So let's say you have, you imagine you're going to go for 12 430 watt panels, and that's going to be roughly 5.2. Let's go for 5.2 kilowatt system, and then you click on submit. Okay, and this will. But now, if you're in the case where you're thinking of going for putting some on one roof and some on another roof, you can add in a second roof in there. Okay, then you can say, so imagine you've got one roof facing. We'll do the example. Let's imagine you have one roof facing west. You have another roof facing east down there. So we're going to split our system. We put a 2.7 on one side, and we put a 2.7 on the other side. This is just to show you because you know the orientation of your roof does make some difference. So it's good to check that out. And then if we click on submit, it's going to calculate and show us over the course of the year what kind of production we will be getting. But it's telling me there overall that 5.2 kilowatt, actually 5.4 kilowatt system is going to produce 4,007 units a year. And you can see there slightly more on the west than on the east. This is just showing split over the course of the year. Again, right? Was there somebody coming in there? Okay, maybe not. But so, okay, piece of information we get from this. First of all, how much it's going to produce annually. And secondly, you can just see the huge factor of 4 or 5 variation between December and January as compared to May, June, July, your peak months. Again, that's why I was asking you the question, what's your load like? You know, are you using more electricity in the winter or in the summer? You know, because that then, if you've got a big, for example, if you have a heat pump, if you have an air-to-water heat pump, your curve will be the exact opposite of this. Your peaks will be in January and, you know, from the start of the year and the end of the year, whereas your solar is going to be peaking in the middle of the year. So that means you'll be exporting more, unless you're going to go for a big battery system. You know, there's a couple of different options there. Okay, since we're here, let me just compare. Gillian, I think you were talking about putting on a west-facing roof. Okay, so let's say this is an east-west facing. You can see east or west is pretty much within a few kilowatts. Get the same production on an east-facing roof or a west-facing roof. So if I was to go now, I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say that we're going to stick all these panels on a south-facing roof. So let's go to south there, and let's submit. Okay, and now we're going from 4,007 to just over 5,000. So you can see you lose roughly 20% of your production when you compare a south-facing roof to an east-west facing roof. Okay, that's just a fact. But of course, you work with the roof that you have as well.
So, Colm, if I was going to go for a ground-mounted system in the garden, which is the house is south-facing, so the back garden would be substantial, it's over an acre. And right. So does the installer determine what's the optimum place? There's obviously trees and hedges and stuff. Now, how do you determine for a ground-face system, aside from the orientation, which will be south, where the exact location should be?
Probably the installer will probably guide you on that. Like shade is one thing. The length of cable run, the length of, because you know that has an impact in terms of the length of the trench that needs to be dug. Also the kind of terrain that you're going through. So there's a couple of factors, and that really is the installer who will give you a few options there, and obviously up to yourself as well. Like you know, in terms of where you'd prefer to have it. But one of the advantages of a ground mount is you can put it in from a production point of view. You can put it in the optimal position.
And do they use tools for that, or do they just say, "Oh, it's experience," and they just wing it?
Well, it depends on the, you know, from a shade perspective, they'll be able to see, you know, that is they will stand in the garden and they will see, okay, there are trees there. You know, typically.
Well, it needs to be back from the house so far, and it needs to be out in the middle. But that's kind of just the thinking around it. There isn't a more database solution to it. It's just an estimation.
It'll be pretty much an estimation. Like
Okay, that's fine.
if there's a very obvious situation with trees, sometimes that will, for example, imagine if you have trees on the eastern side of your garden, the higher trees are on the eastern side of your garden. In that case, you might, and I did this actually with the job I did recently. You would maybe turn the system so it's facing southwest, because then you'll be getting, rather than suffering the shade. Let's say if you have to have shade, rather than suffering the shade and keeping your south-facing ground-mounted system, but getting the shade, then turn the system to the west so that you're changing the time of day where you're facing the sun. But again, it's very rare the installer will. No, there won't be. You can, obviously, there are calculations you can do to do the full skyline in terms of shade. But I'd be very surprised if an installer
Okay, well,
does
that's
that.
fine.
Okay, so that's one little tool that you can use then for working out. You put in your air code, you put in the orientation of your roof, put in the size of your system, and that will tell you the kind of production you'll be getting over the course of the year. So, and it is like quite a few people have used it, and they've said that's based on a European Union funded project. That's just a kind of a different front end that I put onto it. So it's accurate. Okay, now that's one thing in terms of production. Let me back in here into my slideshow. Okay, now the people to write to. Okay, now I'll send you the link to this presentation. The companies I've listed here are either companies I've worked with in the past or companies that are local, that are North Clare, South Galway, or I suppose Clare, East Clare, that kind of way. Let me see, in terms of the people, because the people we have are from Quinn, from Kilkeedy, from Northbourne, from Corofin. So, you've got I included some of the people there's an installer there, Kavanagh Solar in Kinvara. I haven't worked with them, but at the same, you get quotes and see the feeling you get from them. There's JFW Renewables in Loughrea, very big. They're actually partnered. They merged with another big solar company just a couple of weeks ago. There's Energy X Pro in Galway. There's Fitzgerald Electrical in Ennis. They're a big electrical contractor who also do a lot of solar. Comet Renewables in Oranmore. You've got New Solace in Shannon, Solar Exposure in Ennis as well. Eco Air, I put them in because they actually have they've a number of people who work in it from a base in Gort, so they're relatively local for the North Clare people as well. So I put them in there. Energy X Pro, I see the number they have in there is a double number, but they are based in Galway. They're in Galway City, and they have a warehouse in Ennis as well. And then Rob McDonough, based in Ennis Steinman. So he's done quite a bit of work in North Clare as well. So they're, as I say, these are ones that I know of in the region and that I've worked with in the past in a lot of those cases. They're all coming. That link you have down there to the SCI registered list. Let's go and have a look at it, okay? Every installer, in order to get the grant, in order to be insured, in order to work with you, basically, they need to be on this list of this installers list. Now, what you can do in the list is you can see 411. It went from about 172 years ago to 411 now. There's been a huge boom in the last 12 months in the market. Okay, so what you can do is you can filter by county. A lot of them will cover all counties. Then domestic or commercial, obviously you're going for domestic. So for example, let's just see who else is there in Galway. Okay, because what you can see here is that these are companies, they're not necessarily based in Galway, but they're saying they cover Galway. So if you are going if you have a preference for local installers, well, you can start off with the list that I give you there, and then maybe, personally, myself, I do have a preference for working with local installers, just in terms of service, in terms of maintenance, and also in terms of them being concerned kind of about their good name, from a tradesman point of view, I think.
Colin, is there typically any annual maintenance or service fee or anything associated with it?
No, there shouldn't be. They shouldn't be selling you any kind of an annual maintenance fee. The only thing that, depending on, you know, if you're subject to getting like leaves, lots of leaves in, you know, falling on the roof or something like that, there may be cleaning to be done. If you don't have an issue with leaves, or if you don't have an issue with what's the collective noun for pigeons or birds or something, like, you know, who dirtying the whole thing up, people may clean it every 3 years, 4 years, that kind of thing. Like, we do have a good bit of built-in cleaning in the country. You know, we're good that way. It's not like Spain or other places. You know, dust is not so much an issue. We get the wash. So it's not. Don't let anybody sell you a maintenance contract.
Okay, there's no requirement. That's fine.
Yeah, no requirement. Okay, so that is the official place you'll go if you want to go for more installers. You'll find them on that list there. Okay. Now, back into. Okay, let me just get the presentation back up here again. Okay, so the final thing is sending an email. You write the email. So again, the goal here is when you send the email, you say, I want this size system. I want this size battery if I want a battery. Now, again, I would recommend, let's say you're going for a 5 kilowatt system. If you're going for a battery, don't let anybody sell you a smaller battery than a 5 kilowatt hour battery. Okay, there are mod brands out there, 2.5 kilowatts, 3.6 kilowatt hours. It's not worth it. You know, you won't get value from that size battery. Prices of batteries have been dropping, are continuing to drop. They're the one component where over the next few years we will be seeing price drops in batteries. There's no doubt about it. So in some cases, I would say to people, you know, get a price for when you're actually, this is a kind of a one way of asking for quotes as well. Ask for a smaller system than you want, and then say, I might be interested in a battery. I might be interested. So, for example, if you know you want a 5 kilowatt system, ask for a 4 kilowatt system, and say, just in case I'm looking, you know, just in case there's space on the roof, what would an extra kilowatt cost? What would 2 extra kilowatts of panels cost? Or initially you could say, I'm not interested. I'm not sure I'm interested in the battery. You know, give me a price for a battery as an option, because that will push them a little bit to say, okay, I might get battery, even if you know in advance that you do want a 5 kilowatt system with a 5 kilowatt hour battery. So I think that, you know, that's just you can word it different ways. What you need to ask for, you don't want anybody coming back saying, yeah, 5 kilowatts with a battery, no problem, 11,000, 12,000. They need to give you the brands, they need to give you the models for all components, panels, inverter, battery. Okay. Brands, models, and warranties on all of them. Actually, one thing, and I'm going to put that in there before I send it to you. The check option on extended inverter warranty. Okay, often on the inverters you'll get a 5-year warranty as standard, and there usually is an option to go to a 10-year warranty. If the option typically costs about 150, 200 euros, if you get it, I would say go for it. You know, at 200 euros, let's put that in there, okay? You will not.
Are these installer warranties or manufacturer warranties? I'm just thinking that these guys go out of business, you know?
Yeah, these will be manufacturer warranties.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually that's the thing I'm putting this in. To be honest, I threw this together kind of late in the afternoon. Ask about installer workmanship, whatever, guarantee. Okay, some of them will say, you know, they'll give maybe 2 years, 3 years to guarantee their own work. That meaning that if the gear breaks down within a year or two or something like that, they won't charge you to come out and replace whatever it is. Otherwise, if you go beyond that kind of workmanship guarantee, if a panel does fail from a manufacturer's perspective, there can be a cost, or if the inverter breaks down in 5 years' time and needs to be replaced, even if it's covered by warranty, there will be a cost to come out and to take off the old one, stick in the new one, even though the material itself is actually covered. Okay.
Colin?
Yeah.
Is at this stage, let's say you wanted to postpone the battery for phase 2 down the road, whatever. Would you be speccing the other inverter? Isn't there 2 inverters?
Yeah. There's a string inverter which doesn't do batteries, and a
Yeah.
hybrid inverter which does do batteries. So definitely, if you're thinking about, you're not going for battery now, you're going to be, let's say you're thinking prices are dropping, I'll come back in 2 years' time, I'll see how my system is working. Go for a hybrid inverter now.
Okay, a hybrid inverter, right?
Yeah,
okay.
hybrid inverter, yeah.
And that's more expensive, isn't it?
It is more expensive, yeah. But,
right.
As compared to in 2 years' time taking off a cheaper inverter, which will have no resale value, and having to pay for the installer.
Yeah.
It's not, the calculation isn't good. Like second-hand inverters, string inverters are really, there's no value there.
Right. So get the hybrid inverter now, and then would you spec it at this point, could you? Would that be the right move at this stage?
Well, the inverter will be spec'd according to the panels. The battery, like if you have a 5 kilowatt inverter, you can put in a 50 kilowatt hour battery, you can put in a 5 kilowatt hour battery. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the inverter will be spec'd according to the panels. Typically, the inverter is slightly under-spec'd. Like if you have a 5 kilowatt system, now again, you don't have inverters of every size, but let's say if you were going for 6 kilowatts of panels, you'd go for a 5 kilowatt inverter. If you were going for a 4 kilowatts of panels, you might be going for a 3.6 or a 3 kilowatt inverter. They're typically slightly under-spec'd, so don't be surprised if you're seeing a certain amount of panels and that the inverter is actually a little bit smaller. There's a reason for that in terms of the efficiency of the inverter. That you don't want to, like some people, for example, ask the question, well, I might get, maybe in a few years' time, I might get more panels, so I'll put in a big inverter now. That's not a good idea, because if your inverter is oversized, then it won't be. It's a question of the operating efficiency of the inverter. You need to have there's a kind of a sweet spot for the amount of power coming into the inverter to get full efficiency in terms of transformation to the grid. So your inverter should always be either the same or slightly undersized compared to the number of panels. Okay.
Okay.
Now, the question about the SEI grant. Typically, there are 2 ways installers can handle the SEI grant. Some of them will say, when you make the application for the grant, which should be done, which will be done as soon as you agree that you're going to go with installer, you go onto the SEI website, you'll make the application. We might actually talk about that next week and the week after, as quotes start coming back in. People are making decisions. That the time we make the application, the turnaround is very quick. It'll be within 24 hours you get the approval. But when you make the application, you say who's going to get the grant paid to them. So if the installer says, listen, the system is going to cost 10 grand, you get a grant of 2,100, but you'd only pay me 7,900 and put me in as receiving the grant. That'll be at the moment you do the application. So it is, it's another thing to understand as to how they handle the SEI grant, because maybe you'll be happier to only pay 7,900 euros out of pocket rather than pay the 10,000 yourself and then get the money paid back to yourself.
Just a question there for you. It's just going back to the spec there. If you're looking to heat the water column as well, there's a unit there as well to go with that, isn't there?
Yeah, that's the hot water inverter now. Let me see. Let me put in the components are panels is what everyone's going to have. Everyone's going to have an inverter.
Yeah.
And then the options are battery and hot water diverter.
Yeah.
Okay, now the hot water diverter, just to give you a rough idea, it usually costs about 650 euros. Okay, the battery, typically it's around about 2,300 or 2,200 euros for each 5 kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're going for 10 kilowatt hours, it'd be twice that, or that's roughly okay.
That's grand, yeah. Great.
Now, inverter. Okay. The last one then is to ask them that they can be clear with when the installation can happen, because you will get some companies who will give you a very good price, but they'll say we'll be with you in October. Whereas at this time of year, ideally you want to get it in as quickly as possible, so you actually start getting your production and get your system. Not just because you want to get your system producing, but also your system needs to be tested as soon as it's installed. So it's better to install a system when the sun is out. You install a system in December or January, it's hard to know if your system is really working correctly. Like things happen at installation. Things happen. Someone makes a bad connection, someone's having a bad day, and systems do get installed that aren't working correctly initially. It's harder to spot that kind of a fault if the system is installed in January. Whereas if it's installed in June, straight away, you should be able to say, for example, using the stimulator that I put in there, you'll be able to say, my system should have been producing 600 units this month. I'm way down. Something's wrong. It becomes very clear. So you can get things fixed faster, okay? Now, in terms of you've to send them as many pictures as you can that are useful, okay? So send pictures of the roof, a couple of pictures of the roof, from different angles. From that, they'll see whether it's slates or they'll see whether it's tiles or whether it's corrugated or zinc or whatever it is. Send them pictures of where you think you'd like the inverter to go inside. So the space in the utility room, the space in the attic, the access to the attic. That's another thing as well. Like if you want to get a battery, which a 5 kilowatt hour battery will weigh maybe about 40 kilos. It's a heavy piece of gear, So if someone has to get up a step ladder into the attic, may not be ideal, So send them pictures of that as well, and also send them pictures of your fuse board. If you happen to be living in an old house that's got a very old fuse board, sometimes that can be a bit of a surprise when they come out and say, "Oh, hang on, we can't do that. We're going to have to do a bit of rewiring or something in here as well." So send them a picture of your fuse board just to have that. Take that question out of the question.
Paul, I'm on the fuse board. Typically, how old before does it have to be when you say an old fuse board for it to be replaced?
Do you have the screw-in fuses? The ones you twist in?
No, the trip switches.
They're trip switches. Yeah, if you have trip switches, then usually it won't be a big deal.
Okay.
It should be fine. Most of the cases.
The other question: is there an issue around fire with batteries going up in an attic?
I will say there isn't. Okay, the chemistry that's being used in batteries is lithium iron phosphate. It's changed pretty much across the board in terms of the domestic market. And lithium iron phosphate is a chemistry there were issues like the stories we have about lithium batteries going up in fire are lithium. They're the nickel manganese cobalt batteries, the NMC batteries, and there was an issue. If there was problems with manufacturing, there were some, we've all seen the news stories on that. Lithium iron phosphate, no issue whatsoever. Much more stable chemistry. So putting things in attics, like if you have an option, the one thing I would say about the attic, actually I'll say two things about the attic. One thing is access, just getting up there to it. If something, if you want to check and see if a switch is tripped or something, like if you're, simple things like that. The other thing is that if your attic is well insulated on the ceiling, on the floor, that means the temperature in the attic space itself will be swinging, getting much colder in the winter, getting much warmer during the summer. Inverters don't like big temperature swings, so you can get, like, for example, there will be, particularly for low temperatures, there'll be low temperature cutoffs where an inverter will switch itself off if it gets too cold. If you get, like, for example, last December, there was a bunch of people saying, my system's gone because battery temperatures dropped down to -5 degrees and systems were turning themselves off because they were in the attic. Now, it doesn't happen that often. It's not that big a deal. The systems will come back. But I would say if you have the option of someplace else besides an attic, I'd go for another option.
And putting it in an unheated garage, then, is that an issue based on you definitely have a swing with low temperatures in the winter, right?
Yeah, you'd have the same issue as that. Now, what some people do, I've seen a lot of pictures that some installers will put in a little kind of a casing around, or if you want it as an option, they'll put in a little bit of a kind of like a little cabinet, or put the inverter and the battery into a cabinet, which will, from a temperature point of view, helps out. because the inverter itself, it's electronics, it gives off a little bit of heat. So if it's in a smaller, more like it shouldn't be in a closed space. That's one thing. But if it's in a kind of enclosed, obviously with some bit of ventilation, in the winter in a smaller space, it will keep that temperature up a little bit. So in a shed, maybe if if it's easier to build a cabinet in a shed than in the attic, or if you're kind of into DIY yourself and you want to just kind of seal off an area. But if you do build it, like if there is a question of getting a cabinet, you definitely don't want to seal it off completely. You need to have airflow.
Can I ask one other question about installation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it has to do with roofs and problems that may or may not happen with the installation of panels on roofs and penetrating roofs. Is this ever an issue? Leaks?
Yeah, a bad roofer is a bad roofer. You know, there's no, you can't say that there are never issues. I have seen issues, you know, on roofs, and it comes down to bad workmanship. That is actually that's another question you can ask. Because sometimes, you know, some of the installer companies will have their own roofers and they subcontract the electricians. Some will have their own electricians, they subcontract the roofing. Some have all their own people. So that is a question you can ask. Because typically, if they have their own roofers, the roofers will do a better, you know, there's less. In any of the cases I've seen where there were issues, it was always subcontracting roofers. That were the problem. So that is actually, let me put that in there. Ask if roofers, electricians are in-house or subcontracted. Now,
the other thing that you should be asking is for references in your local area. Who have they done the last 12 months, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Now, again, I suppose there's a kind of a balance in terms of if you ask an installer too much, you won't get a quote. You know, do you see what I'm saying? That kind of balance. If you say, yeah, and I want you to call out to the house as well, and I want 3 references, and I want to be able to call around and visit the house, they'll say, yeah, listen, we'll leave this customer go, like, you know. So, you know, you can ask for local references. They may not give them to you. You know, they may not have people that they've lined up that are willing to give out their details. So I wouldn't put that in as a showstopper, but why not ask the question, you know? Okay, now that pretty much think is what is there anything that's coming to your minds that you think could go in there as well? That's typically what I advise people to put into their quote. So you tell them the size. Now, okay, let me go in here. Or undersize and ask for price of extra kilowatt of panels, extra 5 kilowatt hours of battery. Now, when I'm saying that again is the idea is, if you know the size system you do want, let them sell it to you. Let them give you, say, like in that case, say, I'm looking for a 4 kilowatt system with a hybrid inverter, not sure about getting a battery. So give me a price for the 4 kilowatt system without a battery, and then go on, give me a price for a 5 kilowatt system with a 5 kilowatt hour battery. You know, to approach it that way, because that doesn't take that much more time to do up that, you know, to give 2 prices. And very often they will say, this is what an extra kilowatt of panels costs. This is what every 5 kilowatt hours of battery costs. That's, you know, they have those kind of figures. So that's not a problem to ask that kind of information. Okay, now let me put this back up there. Yeah. Okay. Now, any questions coming out of that? We've gone way over time. Do you feel, in terms of how you feel about being ready to send out a request for quote now? Do you feel ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay. The goal for next week is, well, the next 2 weeks, is that people get the quotes out, you know, this evening, tomorrow. You know, you write your quote, you bang it out to the to the installers, and hopefully you start getting quotes back. And then next week, what we'll do is we'll look at the quotes, and we'll go through individual quotes and see what's, take 2 or 3 quotes for the same job, compare, see what's missing, what looks good, what prices look good, and we'll even build up, I think, a little bit of kind of a spreadsheet of quotes that are coming in that different people are getting. So you'll be able to compare to prices that other people are getting as well. So while you may have gotten quotes from these 6 installers, if somebody else got them from 6 other ones, well then you'll be able to compare like with like. Okay, so as during the week, if let's say you do bang out your request tonight and you start getting prices back, I would appreciate if you could send me on some quotes that you get, and then I can start pumping them into a spreadsheet so we can use that to compare. So if as you start getting quotes, I would appreciate it. Now send it back to me.
Cool.
Okay, actually, I'm just thinking now in terms of okay. Include pictures of rooms, so give air code and orientation, roof type. Okay, just in case that it's not that clear from the photographs, okay? Now, typically in terms of, okay, your air code, orientation, if you wanted, you could just take a screenshot of a Google Maps satellite picture, and then they'll be able to see which way the roof is going that way, like you don't need to measure down to the degree, and then the roof type is good, so that's clear. Okay, so any questions?
Just one question, Colin. Do you think there's any chance that the grant amount could change this year? Either improve or reduce?
I would say it definitely won't improve.
It won't improve. Okay.
No. Like when the feed-in tariff came in February 2022, at the same time they gave a calendar for the phased reduction of the grant. So it dropped at the end of 2023. It dropped from 2,400 to 2,100. At the end of this year, I think it's supposed to drop again to 1,800. And the idea being that I think by 2026 that there is the grant is gone.
Right. Okay.
The goal is to grow the market. I think it's fair enough. We definitely have seen prices like the market has matured, and this is what genuine prices are. Now there's going to be an election within 12 months.
That's what I'm thinking too. Yeah.
All bets are off in that case. Like you could have there could be a massive promises in September for huge grants for solar, but like at this stage, they're taking the VAT off. They brought in the feed-in tariffs. You're in a pretty good situation, I think. For and the prices are I find are reasonable.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, so any more questions?
My only question is if where we will find the next meeting, and should I have received an email?
I'll send on another email, because I'm going to send this out to yourselves and to everybody else who's in the different sustainable energy communities. So there will be a new
Zoom.
Yeah, there'll be a new Zoom link in that email.
Okay. How do we make sure? I mean, do you think you have my email address? Because I haven't gotten anything. I've just written to you today, so perhaps when you get to your email, you'll see that I wrote.
Okay. Because at the moment, is there anybody who? Because actually, there's a good one, because that kind of it was maybe an oversight. I was writing to all the people who had registered from the different SECs in Northbourne and Kilkeedy and Corofin and Quinn. But of course, I had said to people, tell your friends, tell your neighbours. So I may not have. If there's anybody out there who hasn't been receiving emails from me, can you either write an email to me? Okay, good call, Mark. or stick it up in the chat if you want to throw it up in the chat there now. And that way I'll take it from there. Okay, so listen, let's take it. Your homework then is start asking for quotes. If you can send me the quotes, great. That way I'll just kind of tidy them up and we'll be ready for next Monday. Otherwise, next Monday we'll start looking at quotes, comparing quotes with quotes, and be able to see what's missing, what's good, what's bad. And also, you know, things change, offers come in. Maybe some installers are offering some new things that I haven't seen before. We can share that as well.
If there was enough of us that wanted them, could we haggle? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
If there was 3 or 4 in Corofin, could we say, like, look, can you reduce the price and you'll get 4 houses?
Yeah, you can. I used to work like that in the first Meitheals that I used to do, because in the first Meitheals, I suppose I was kind of choosing the installers, and but even at that point, the price reduction you were getting was like maybe 2%, 3%. It was very small.
Okay.
The real advantage of coming as a group is that they will do it faster. They will come out if they know they have 3 or 4 jobs in Corofin. They'll be happier. They'll be answering quicker. They'll be saying they'll be able to do it quicker, and you know you get the installation done. Like if there's one person from Carrigaholt who wants the installation done, you know, they may not be getting someone saying, yeah, I'll be with you next week. Like, you know, that could be the job that'll be done in October when things are quiet. So I would say the idea as a group, like they will see if everyone's sending in requests for quotes pretty much kind of written the same way, they'll know it's coming from a group that I'm working with. And they will know, then they'll see the areas you're coming from. So now you can put it in if you want to put it in the email saying we're doing this as part of a group. Just, you know, to remind them that they're clear on that. Amongst yourselves, like if there's a few people that are saying we're all from Corofin or thereabouts, if you want to go ahead and use that as a bit of negotiating with the installers, why not? To be honest, I won't do it, but absolutely feel free to do it, you know. Okay, there was a question.
Well, thank you very much, Colm.
Okay, there was just one question
Thank
there.
you.
I'm curious if you think there are companies that are better for more complicated situation, multiple meters and roofs. Yeah, now Mark, your situation 4 meters is a different. That is. No, it's you're basically multiplying the same thing. Well, depending obviously where the usage is, like, you know. So it'd be hard for me to say a bigger company, like for example, Fitzgerald Electrical, they're contractors, electrical contractors. You know, they're a bigger company. JFW are a bigger company. Energy X Pro, they're a bigger company. You know, I would say that. You know.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So listen,
Thank you.
we leave it at that, or any more questions?
That's fine.
That's great. Thanks, Colin.
Okay.
Bye.
All
Thanks,
right.
Colin.
Listen, get those.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Get those quotes out, and we'll. And again, anybody you know who may be interested, let them. If they want to join in next week, just even see the quotes. Bring them. The more, the merrier. Okay.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.